So I was out in the rowboat the other day.
Right. A rowboat out on Lake Ontario. That sounds like a dangerous idea.
Well, that sounds like a great idea, actually.
No, not without a life preserver.
A lot of people are probably out on Lake Ontario on rowboats today, yeah.
They probably are, and without life preservers.
Yeah. Not like us, because we're sitting on the couch.
We're out on the porch again.
Right. Well, we were trying to decide what this pirate sounded like.
Pirate Johnston.
Pirate Johnson, yeah. Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari.
I'm Matthew.
And today we are going to be talking about a pirate. Now,
Yahar.
Get that out of your head. This is a different pirate. This is a very northern pirate.
Time for a paradigm shift here, folks.
Yes, we are not talking about a pirate sailing the Caribbean, running under issues of piracy, privateering. We are talking about
He didn't appear in a Disney film or the cover of a cereal box.
Yep.
Okay.
And he probably didn't sound like somebody from how do you say that?
From the Midlands?
Midlands in England as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy, we're going to have to talk a little bit about Canadian and American conflicts. We are going to have to talk about the St. Lawrence area, the Thousand Island area, and we're going to be talking about a pirate who probably sounds closer to the guys from Letterkenny than he does to Johnny Depp. So you'd be more likely to say, how you now?
So, I was out on the lake the other day.
And we were rowing with my 6 boys.
So you only took a 6-pack with you out there.
No, you're in it to win it. Yeah. Okay, that's the end of our Letterkenny stuff. Oh my God.
Get to chorin'.
All right. So we have to start our story in Canada. William Bill Johnson was born in Trois-Rivières on February 1st, 1782. His father was Irishman and his mother was a Dutch. Yay, Dutch, represent. Okay. In the War of 1812, he fought. He actually lived in Sackett's Harbor and Watertown. So how did this Canadian boy end up fighting for the United States side, 1812? And how did he actually get to be a spy? So Pirate Bill Johnson, like I said, he was in Canada, but yet he ended up assisting the Americans. So what happened? Why did this guy switch sides?
Had to be a significant event.
It was. His first 30 years, happily living in Canada, near Kingston, Ontario, where he became an apprentice to a blacksmith. At 22 years old, he went into making potash. If you're not familiar with what potash is, it is I believe it's used in soap. It was used in a few things, but it comes from the ashes of wood.
Was it potash?
Potash.
Potash.
It looks like pot ash, but it's potash.
It actually is.
It contains potassium, is what it is used for. It refers to plant ashes soaked in a pot. So it's used in fertilizer. I think it is used in some types of soap making. Back then, you just basically threw the ashes in a pot and then collected it afterwards. So, it was pretty easy to do, but it was pretty lucrative as well. He got his own schooner at the age of 24. So this guy was pretty up and coming, but so far nothing really outlandish is happening in his life. When he got the schooner, although he was transferring a lot of legal cargo, he was also smuggling in tea and rum.
Oh.
So he was already starting to smuggle. I wouldn't call him a pirate yet. He married an American who came to live with him in Canada. They had their family. His smuggling operation was very successful, and he was able to buy a store at the time valued $12,000.
Yeah.
So can you just imagine? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's quite the pretty penny back then.
Yeah, he married Anne Randolph with his Kingston store in that area.
Yeah.
And in that era, at 30, he was rather a prosperous merchant.
Right. So what went wrong? What went wrong?
Dun.
Well, we had the War of 1812. All right.
Absolutely.
The War of 1812, some people describe it as the First World War, the first real World War, because it was fought both in Europe and in the Americas. Some people also call it the continuation of, you said it the other day, I forgot the term you said. It was a continuation of a different war. It was, yeah.
Well, the 7 Years' War
Right.
was kicked off by all the other previous wars, but it was a significant event. It was protracted into the Americas.
Right.
And then to pay for that, the British Crown decided to, use its colonies as a way to pay for the 7 Years' War globally.
Which started the Revolutionary War.
That was one of the nuanced elements as to why, as to the wheres and whys of the American War for Independence.
People were still reeling from that, and the War of 1812 happened because of it. Okay. The Americans attacked the British colonies in Canada. And in May 1813, the Kingston military commander tells Bill Johnson he has him arrested for spying. Now, here's the thing.
And what grounds?
He was a smuggler, and people knew that. And he'd married an American. I think they needed somebody to, Was he a spy? Well, we don't know back then. Later.
The British authorities needed a way to look butch for the press.
Yes.
Yes.
Like I said, at that point, I don't know if he was a spy, but later, things changed. There were things that, made him seem suspicious. Well, one, he was married to an American. Two, all the able-bodied men were supposed to sign up into the militia, and he paid his brother to take his place. Actually, that was very common. You'd pay somebody else to take your place, and he had a business to run. It didn't seem like his brother was doing anything malicious by this or anything. It was pretty common practice. But his brother took off to the American side, and now they were going to force Bill.
Made Bill look even more suspicious.
Right. He was still continuing his business with America at this time during the war. So this all looks suspicious to the British.
Instead of being approached by the British authorities and saying, hey, there's all this going on, is it true that, is there any truth to this?
Instead they just...
asked, nobody asked, it seems, nobody asked Bill Johnston whether or not he was up to any of this stuff. Nor is there any account here that any of Bill's associates had anything to do with smuggling. It seems like a pretty baseless accusation.
Except he did smuggle some Americans back to the United States. They had been arrested. He paid their bail, snuck them back. And then he was accused of spying. So it strikes me as this guy was looking out for his own business. He did bail the Americans out, but I'm wondering how much kickback he was getting for doing that, too.
I imagine there was something exchanged. You get nothing from nothing. So, some kind of exchange that was off the books. The only thing we know about it is that he bailed them out and brought them back. That's all.
Right.
We don't have anybody's ledger from the time such and such money's paid to Bill Johnston.
Don't give them much time to do research. Yeah.
For services rendered in returning American patriots to American soil. Sort of thing. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
There's no record.
The head of the Kingston militia actually sends one of Johnson's friends over to arrest him. And it's a very comical situation where his friend knocks on the door.
Hiya. Well, I'm here to arrest you.
Bill, I'm here to arrest you. And Bill's like, yeah, just a minute.
Yeah, we're here to nick your ass.
And so he doesn't come out. Bill, I'm here to arrest you. Yeah, just a minute. And then they knock down the door, and there's Bill hightailing it out the back window.
He sees him, right? The guy who's there to arrest him sees him as he's ducking out the back.
Yeah.
Like, you can't make this stuff up.
So he's gone, and he goes straight to the American side.
So there you go.
Yeah, so Bill...
He slips his cable in pirate terms.
So Bill later wrote that, he said, upon that time I solemnly declare I had no communication with the American Army, Navy, or any individual to my knowledge, and by whom any information was likely to be conveyed to the enemy to the injury of His Majesty's subjects and those of the realm. So he claims up until this point, those accusations were just accusations. He wasn't engaged in spying. He was probably doing the smuggling, and that's probably why he saved those Americans. They probably were being paid to be smuggled back.
They were the cargo.
So
Bill's into human trafficking.
So Bill ends up at Sackett's Harbor, which we were up there a couple weeks ago. Sackett's Harbor is quite beautiful, and I highly recommend visiting.
It's a lovely place.
Check
out our videos, please.
Yeah. So that's where he ends up. We were up near Sackett's Harbor. And there, as he's settling in after escaping the British at that point, they confiscate his store and the 400 acres of farmland. And at that point, Bill's like, you've crossed the wrong guy. His family did safely make it to America. If you're worried about his wife and his children, they're fine. They made it to America. So
saw that first of all before he went rogue.
So here they grab his store, they grab his land, they've accused him of spying. He wasn't spying. He was in some nefarious stuff, but he wasn't spying.
Local law enforcement would be, if there was such a thing at that time, it would be the Army. Right. Probably, yeah.
Mainly the Canadian Navy that was after him at this point. And here's the thing. Bill snuck into the United States to Sackett's Harbor via a canoe. Now, for some people who are not familiar with the geography up there, you're thinking, big deal, he used a canoe. It is the Thousand Island area, and there is over 1,000 islands in that area, and I could see him doing island hopping. And you can take small boats between the United States and Canada. People do it all the time up here. It doesn't sound that impressive. It is and it isn't. You know, depending on the time of year, taking a canoe out there could be quite dangerous. But he made it. And so then for the next 2 years, Johnson made war in the United States using a gig, which was a rowboat manned by 6 oarsmen. And it was perfect for attacking the British ships. It was small. It could maneuver in between the islands. And if they were caught, like on shore, all they had to do was pick the boat up and run. And
well, it doesn't sound like a light gig to me.
So then he did become a spy. He started spying on the British. He attacked their supply lines. He intercepted mail couriers. And he also assisted in the Battle of Sackett's Harbor and Crystal Farm. When we were up at Sackett's Harbor, we were actually up near the fort area and that. They didn't say anything about Bill Johnson when we were up there. I didn't catch anything on any of the billboard, any of the writings or anything. But he did fight there. But there were 3 different forts in that one area. There was the main fort, which they have 2 buildings left of, and then there were 2 other forts that they had marked.
Oh, yeah.
And one was British controlled at one point. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Let's put it this way. You can walk less than an hour around those entire area where all those forts were. We did it. Yeah. So we're not talking like these were spread out all over the place. No, these were a very compact area. And it is a very strategic place to have a fort.
Yes, there are areas around the Thousand Islands where there's plenty of rough country on these little islands where you can stash stuff in the rocks. It's really nifty. And there are areas eroded away from underneath the layers of rock where you can stash stuff. I could see where it would make a perfect smuggler's den up there in the Thousand Islands at some of the places. And I wouldn't doubt it if...
Wellesley Island.
Wellesley Island.
Wellesley Island. We were up there a couple weeks before Sackett's Harbor. That's the largest island in the Thousand Island. Oh my gosh.
It was on Wellesley Island.
But as you're walking around that island, you look out and there are all these little islands. And some of them are only big enough to maybe put a small cabin on. And people do. And some are a little larger. You might see one like a little farm on them or something. But so when we're talking islands, we're not talking they're all huge. That Wellesley Island is gigantic. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. And it's beautiful, too. I mean, the whole area up there is beautiful. Okay.
But I could see why something like that would be appealing to smugglers. That piece of rock I'm talking about, check out the video, too. And honestly, I can see an island like that would be attractive because you sit high enough on the top of that rock, and it's all flat. Once you get up to it. But, man, it's a hike. Your position is like 30, 40 feet in the air. And from that vantage point, you can't be seen from the bottom.
No.
Even if you've got a fire going, if you've got a reasonable campfire going somewhere around the middle of the rock, it won't be seen from the lake. And you could be sitting there, you could be hiding out, sheltering in place, and whatever authorities around the lake, United States or British, they won't be able to see you.
Right.
And it's very easy to conceal yourself up in those areas, so it's very attractive to smugglers. Probably still is.
So the war ends, and he settles with his family in Clayton, New York. Set up a shop, and he continues smuggling. And he's still smuggling his tea and rum into Canada. The funny thing is, the U.S. Revenue Service paid him to spy on Canadian smugglers. So basically, he was smuggling the stuff into Canada and also spying on his competition for the United States. So that's pretty good. Now we're going to go into a section of history that I didn't know much about until I moved up here, because I'd hear about this particular conflict once in a while. I think Canadians are probably more familiar with it than the United States. The first time I heard reference to it was in some other thing I was researching. This person mentions in their book about watching the Patriots march up to Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
And what they were talking about is this war that happens in Canada, and it's not really a war.
You're referring to the Patriot War?
Patriot War. It's the Patriot War. It was, let's just say, a dispute that got a bit out of hand. A philosophical dispute that got a bit out of hand.
As I've heard it told, it was more or less a war of ideas.
Pretty much. What happened was there was a secret organization known as the Hunters Lodge. So a lot of these people were called hunters that had settled in Vermont. They had sympathy with the 1837 rebellions of Upper and Lower Canada. In Vermont, the Lower Canada refugees started spreading westward, and so they would come through upstate New York, basically, all the way over to Buffalo. That's why this part of New York got kind of sucked into it, too. Mm-hmm. So you had these refugees from Canada. So the refugees from Canada, they started getting support and that from other refugees in the area, and like I said, it spread over upstate New York pretty good. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go too much of a history of it because, one, I'm just learning about this now, but and I'm a little confused about who's happening, what happening, and everything. So if any Canadian listeners are listening to this, if you want to give us a nice explanation of the Patriot War, please do. But it affected us here in the United States, and it especially affected somebody who was smuggling. Okay. In December 1837, a small band of men, they rebelled against the British rule. So they decided they were going to kick the British out of their country, okay? They were quickly defeated at Montgomery's Tavern. They escaped, and then they declared they had the Republic of Canada. And this was being supported by American sympathizers. So
fleeing to Navy Island.
Navy Island, that's where it was. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The British followed them and destroyed their main supply ship, Rebellion's main supply ship, the Caroline. But they killed an American soldier in the process.
Well, sailor, actually.
Sailor, sorry. Thank you. This did not sit well with Johnson. He joined the Upper Canadian rebels. He was appointed Admiral of the Eastern Navy, although they had no ships. So
there you go. Well, you've got an admiral. You know, all you need now are some boats and.
Yep. So they started attacking Canada. They did at least 7 attacks. Johnson was helping planning these attacks. I mean, he was actually in Detroit at one point planning these attacks. And then they also planned an attack on Kingston. And they temporarily did hold some Canadian land for a while. Then here comes what gives him the moniker pirate. I mean, he's already a smuggler. He's already been a spy. He's halfway there. How did he become a pirate in the public's mind? Mm-hmm. I mean, he's smuggling rum already. I mean, what could he do, right? They went to capture the passenger steamer, the Sir Robert Peel. They needed it for transport. So they were at Wesley Island, mm-hmm. loading firewood for the steam boilers, and Johnson's men set out through the woods. 9 of them got lost. 13 of them, including Johnson, attacked the ship and were able to get the 80 passengers and crew onto the wharf. And then Johnson orders the ship untied. It drifts downstream. And there were supposed to be more people sent to help the rebels, but they never arrived. But they don't have enough people to run the ship. So what do? They just stole the ship, left all the passengers on the dock. What do? They decide, well, what the hell? Take everything you can and burn it. And that's exactly what they did. The Americans did arrest Johnson's crew, the ones who did the actual looting and burning. The first jury refused to put the first man they put on trial. They acquitted him. Mm-hmm. And they realized no matter who they put on trial for this, they were all going to be acquitted because the Americans were very sympathetic to what mm-hmm. these Canadians were going through.
Right.
And even though Johnson was running the large, he was bragging about how he destroyed the Peel. There you go.
Absolutely.
So now the British and the Americans are both looking for him. And it's the first
quite a popular guy.
The first time that the Americans did allow the British vessels to come into their waters. But then, Americans up in that area didn't like seeing the British ships. It's still pretty raw memories.
Yeah, they don't like the idea of seeing foreign ships in their waters. Mm-hmm. really ire people up.
Mm-hmm. This is where
offensive.
Some of the, I think, the folk tales started of Mr. Johnson, Bill Johnson. Things like he knew all the secret caves and caverns around the Thousand Islands. That's why he could slip away, and his daughter would bring him food so he didn't starve. And there was all these romanticized ideas about how he was hiding out there. Probably the truth of the matter was he was hiding out with friends, but nobody would turn him in.
Right. In mid-July 1838, the United States asked the British to stay out.
Yeah, they finally had enough of that.
The citizens wrote all their representatives saying, hey, what's this?
Yeah.
People publicly saying, we don't want this happening. Many people saying, we don't know who this Johnston character is. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that's all about. All I know is I've got British ships in our sovereign waters.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
So
they rejected it in 1838. They asked them to stay out.
So, but later that year, in November, 250 American patriots crossed the St. Lawrence River from Ogdensburg, and you can still cross there, the Ogdensburg Bridge, which, by the way, that one time when we were taking our one son up to college, and the Border Patrol were looking for somebody, and we were driving. The road we were going on has a main connection to the Ogdensburg Bridge, and they were stopping everyone. But we got waved through.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else was being stopped. We pull up. We're ready to stop. I'm already pulling out my ID, and they're just like, go through. I'm like...
Right, yeah. The New York State Patrol was out there.
With the Border Patrol.
With the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
They were looking for somebody.
Yep, but apparently...
Evidently, we were not the ones they were looking for.
Right. But it was really weird because they stopped like every vehicle in front of us. I don't know what was different with us, but maybe our vehicle, maybe the fact there were four of us. I don't know, but it was strange.
Whatever it was, we were not the ones they were out after.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to William. They leave from Ogdensburg and they attack Prescott. But that fails. They try to occupy the hamlet of Newport. This is all on the Canadian side. But they were forced to surrender. So what did this have to do with Johnson? Well, Johnson, he was bringing supplies to the Patriots. They had ships at that point. They ran aground and he helped get them back into the water. Well,
something about the American Hunter Patriots.
Yeah.
What kind of forward observation did they do on this sort of thing?
Probably nothing pretty good since it ended really quickly for them.
It ended really badly.
So
I'm just wondering, what their intelligence was. Probably nothing.
So finally, Johnson is arrested. He surrenders. Basically, he faced numerous charges, sat in jail, and nobody wanted to convict him. Everybody liked him. So he basically went, well, this is boring, and left. Mm-hmm.
This is in 1830s. Mm-hmm. The War of 1812 has been over for
about 20 years.
20 years now. This is still going on.
Right.
This is still ongoing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They were highly motivated, really were, in getting this thing drawn into reality, this Republic of Canada. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering why maybe it didn't have enough support down here in the United States for such a thing. Considering, even at this time, feelings were still pretty raw towards Canada. So, because of the War of 1812, I'm just surprised they didn't have more, more of a following, that's all.
So, like I said, he just basically walked out of jail at that point. Mm-hmm. And in 1841, he goes to see President Van Buren and asks for a pardon. And the president did meet with him, but he said that he would rather see him shot or hanged instead of pardoned. And Johnson recounted that Mr. Van Buren scolded me for presuming to come here with such a petition, but I waited 10 days and then presented it to President Harrison. And he pardoned me. So that was pretty crafty on him. He's like, maybe Van Buren is way out, soft.
You see why term limits work, folks.
Yes.
Remember that.
So how did this pirate end his days?
Yes.
I actually ended up with a pretty cushy gig. He was appointed, on April 12, 1853, he was appointed the keeper of the Rock Island Lighthouse. This comes from the 1868 publication, The Pictorial Field Book of the War of 1812, talking about Johnson. His offense was finally overlooked, and for several years the government that offered the reward of $500 for him as an outlaw paid him $350 a year for taking charge of one of the lighthouses in sight of the spot of Peel Island where the offense was committed. where he destroyed the steamship is where he ended up getting paid quite a nice sum for manning the lighthouse.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The life.
So why do some people remember him? Well, they do celebrate him in the areas up there. In Alexandria Bay, New York, every year they have Bill Johnson Pirate Days. There is a reenactment they do of the alleged pirate ship attack on the village, which never happened. He never attacked any American town.
Mm-hmm. Which makes Bill Johnston such a friend to us.
Yes. But also in this festival, he suddenly turned into a pirate of the Caribbean as well. Not the type of pirate.
I don't understand Alexandria Bay's 10-day pirate debauch soiree. I mean, it's 10 days. It's bigger than Oktoberfest. Why?
Yeah. But, now, they're trying to make it more, people, you have your idea of what a pirate is.
Yeah.
It's not some guy who,
exactly.
Probably was wearing normal clothes of the period, probably, didn't speak with that, no.
Because it was many years
yeah.
after that sort of pirate archetype had faded from the landscape.
Right.
So to speak, because, we're talking about activities that go out on the water.
Except for spying on his competition, he was never given privateer rights.
Yeah.
So he truly was not a real pirate. He was a smuggler.
Oh,
he was a spy.
I'm certain that the British authorities probably accused him of being a privateer
yeah.
and holding letters of marque against His Majesty's Navy
yeah.
on the authority of the United States government.
God
That'd be a handy way of condemning both Johnston and the United States of America in the
right.
stroke.
Right. And here's the thing, though. You got this big party going on in Alexandria Bay. Oh, it's pirates. Oh, drink rum. Let's drink rum. Let's party. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He was a teetotaler and a non-smoker. And he wore
you got to keep your head clear when you're about to,
Who was that pirate from the Caribbean area who was like that too? He had very strict rules.
Wasn't it Black Bart?
Was it Black Bart? I think it was Black Bart. I mean, literally had rules like you were in bed by 8 p.m.
No gambling your buttons.
No gambling. No drinking while on duty. Yeah, he had very strict rules.
No fighting, any of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but,
no fighting. Yeah, no fighting because that had to be settled by. If there was a fighting, they would actually pull like a committee, and and even though these were very strict rules, they were very progressive compared to what the navies were running with rules at that time. So even though you look at these rules,
the Navy had martial rules.
Right.
The pirates,
they were more democratic.
Yeah, exactly. They had more democratic elements in it.
And I think Bill Johnson really didn't care for the rules as long as he was looking out for himself. And really what the Canadian, I'm going to say, the guy in Kingston who started it all, accusing him of being a spy and all that, really put the blame on him. I think if he would have left Bill Johnson alone, none of that other stuff would have happened. He would still been a smuggler, but he'd been smuggling for the Canadians.
Just a convenient guy to throw underneath the bus just to show that they're doing their job.
Oh, yeah, and he also had 400 acres of land that could be easily grabbed by the Crown at that point.
Was it ever verified that Bill Johnston actually had that 400 acres of land?
He was very successful by the time he bought his he bought a shop. He was already successful at that point thanks to the smuggling. He had enough money to buy all that land for farming and whatever. So he was wealthy. I mean, I'm not going to. He wasn't this.
Well, it's no wonder then that they attacked him.
Yeah.
Because he had all this material wealth.
And he was married to an American and had business dealings in America as well.
A successful, international entrepreneur.
Right.
Boy, that kind of thing's repeated in our day.
Right.
That sort of thing happens now.
What's interesting, though, that in the stories they tell up in Alexander Bay, I mean, you just take a quick look, and they've embellished him quite a bit. So
that's for sure.
We have the real Pirate Johnson. We have the real Bill Johnson, who basically was like, oh, man, you backed the wrong horse when you did that to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. You got to admit, it was all revenge. You got to admit, it was
retaliation.
It was all retaliation for what the Canadians did to him. But then,
it was.
I love the fact he was smuggling, and the Americans were paying him to spy on the competition. I love that one. That's pretty good.
Is that kind of a stretch?
I don't think so, because They knew he was. Everyone knew he was a smuggler.
Of course,
it was
yeah,
like an open secret. Everyone
There's
knew.
no proof that he was in any of this other stuff.
The spying, yes, the spying for the Americans, the only spy, but that happened after the War of 1812.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, he didn't actually become a spy until he went to the American side. Mm-hmm. And when he went to the American side, well, he helped him out. I mean, he was there at Sackett Harbor pushing him back. Probably not as interesting as some of the other people we've talked about. Definitely not as unearthly as some of the other people we talked about. There's no ghost here. But he did become a folkloric legend. And it really is a neat part of history that really don't touch upon a lot. You know? I mean, the war in 1812, yes, that does get talked about in American history. But, you know, until I lived up here, what the heck was the Patriot War? Huh? You know?
The ghosts,
yeah, basically,
they consist of the talk.
Yeah.
That goes on around about the figure. Mm-hmm. That's where the ghosts are. They're not really the unverifiable things that go on, that are said, that went on. You really can't. Those are where the ghosts lie in this story. You got the hearsay that surrounds the legend about the figure, you know, who was Pirate Bill Johnston. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think he was a pretty prominent character. I mean, if he was in these attacks, he would never hide his face. He wanted people to know this was him. Well, yeah, he was sticking it back to the Canadians. It's like, you took my property. I'm going to let you know it's me doing this. And,
absolutely.
And I think that's partly why they could never really try him, too, because it was a situation where you just got like a Robin Hood figure almost.
I wonder who signed the executive order to take, at what level, Bill Johnston's property away from him in Canada.
Right.
Different rules, folks, applied in Canada to property rights than here in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Due to the Constitution, they couldn't grab it unless
they couldn't just snatch it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Bill Johnston had a constitutional right to his property in America. Would have had if he was on the stateside rather than.
So that's why that's why he came to America. That's why he made sure the British knew it was him doing it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of the stories started to be embellished about him. Partly due to him. He wanted people to know it was him doing this stuff. Yeah. And he was a smuggler. We're not going to, he smuggled those Americans back because the British wouldn't allow them to go back. Even though they were paid bail, they were like, no, you can't go back. You got to stay on this side of the river.
Okay, let's talk. Let's talk conspiracy theory. Okay. Let's say Bill Johnston was approached by people because he knew names on this side of the border.
Right, which he did, yeah.
And those people got into contact with the people who had relatives who were being held by the Canadians, by the British authorities in Canada. Those people were concerned family members who approached Bill Johnston through those connections that he had through his smuggling ring and said, we'll pay you monies to pay their bail and bring them back. Could have had a setup like that, but of course a setup like that never goes on the books. Right. It's probably passed by word of mouth. And that's the way you did it back then. You couldn't just send somebody an email or a text message or even a letter.
Well, you could argue he had American sympathies because he married an American.
Yeah.
So Pirate Bill marries the American. They probably think he has American sympathies. He's got business dealings in America. He is a good target. And he's rich. Oh, yeah. He's a good target. Well, here's this rich guy. And plus, he didn't serve immediately. He paid his brother to serve, which I had to stress, that was common practice. Yeah. But he didn't serve not because, screw you, Canada. Although there is a story where he beat up his commanding officer when he was supposed to serve. He beat the guy up. I couldn't verify if that was folktale or not.
And didn't get flogged to death?
Yeah, I could not verify if that was folktale or not.
It's got to be, because he would have been court-martialed and hung or something. This is when the armies of the West were still flogging armies.
But
literally.
I don't think we did him justice, but I really do think if somebody in Hollywood wants to make a different type of pirate movie, this would be it. Uh-huh. So... Okay, I think we're going to end it because I'm hearing more vehicles coming. So, all right.
Yeah.
So, all right. That was the story of Pirate Bill Johnson. Yeah. Like I said, it probably speaks more like how you doing now than her.
Yeah. Yeah. In Alexandria Bay's 10 days,
It's a reason to party, basically.
Yeah,
It's become a reason to party. And, you got to keep the modern view. You got to keep the modern view of what we think pirates are. I mean, the modern pirates are definitely not like the Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, they're attacking ships with submachine guns, So, yeah. And this guy was... It would be a different view on pirates. I would love to see a movie done on him, if it hasn't already been done. I should investigate that. Maybe somebody did do it. I find him to be an interesting character. Definitely part of upstate history. Definitely part of Canadian history. As colorful as he became. I mean, he was kind of a... I hate to say it again. If they hadn't accused him of spying when he wasn't spying.
If they hadn't gone after...
him.
Bill Johnston.
Yep. He would never came to the American side. He never would have
came over to the American side and caused all of this problems for them.
Yeah.
Well, the motivations of the authorities at the time to go after Bill Johnston were clear.
Yeah.
They needed to show they were doing something, by golly, about this threat, to our south and this upstart American United States. Yep. And it was still very young at the time. And they have the Napoleonic Wars going on over there. Yep. And now historians are finally starting to come around to the idea that maybe the War of 1812 was, again, a protraction of the wars going on the European continent. Mm-hmm. And so some people, you talk to some British people and they say, the War of 1812 was just a funky little footnote on our... Well, okay. To any of our British listeners, well, all right. But fact of the matter remains.
It happened.
And you did march down to D.C. and burn it. And
Which, I gotta say, I always give Canadians credit for, because they are the only country that did it. That actually did something, yeah.
They did not provide for the common defense like they were supposed to here, which allowed... them to just didn't they just kind of waltz in and take it?
Well, yeah, but I believe it was Madison was president at the time, and Dolly did some really badass things protecting what needed to be protected, like making sure the portrait of Washington had got smuggled out. And she was like one of the last people to leave the White House. Not enough people give her credit, but she was very badass at that point, because Madison was off somewhere else doing what he was supposed to be doing, and no one expected the British troops to show up and especially attack the White House. Yeah. And as they got closer, they're like, "We got to get you out," and she's like, "I got to rescue some of this stuff." It wasn't for vanity; it was because she knew if the British got a hold of it, they would burn it. They would burn it and destroy it. So she actually stayed as long as she could, sneaking that stuff out. So hey, give her credit. Give her credit, exactly. Credit was due.
So kudos to Dolly Madison.
Yep. She makes more than donuts. Okay.
Helping us preserve our heritage.
I believe it was Madison. I'll look it up later, and if I'm wrong, we'll cut this whole part out. Anyway, so that was Unearthly Upstate.
Yes, thank you for listening to our not-so-ghastly podcast this time.
Yep. So, we need to do lighter ones once in a while.
Once in a while. It can't all be true crime. And so farewell for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.